If you're working in learning and development, in training, or in coaching, I know that this episode will particularly speak to you. Now, picture this. You've spent months designing a training program. You've built the content, you refined the slides, maybe you brought an external facilitator, and the day arrives, the room is engaged, people are laughing, they're sharing, asking great questions, and the feedback scores are stellar. People rate it 5 out of 5, 4 out of 5. You feel relieved. You think it worked. Then 3 weeks later, you walk the floor, you sit in the next meeting, and you observe the next call. What do you see? Same behaviors, same as before, the same pattern, the same gaps that the training was supposed to fix. Does this sound familiar? Yes, this is something that I want you to know right now. This is not your fault. This is not the fault of your content. It has nothing to do with how good your facilitator was or how beautiful the workbook was. This is something much more structural. And today, I will tell you exactly what you can give to make it totally different. And the best thing is, there's zero budget attached to it. So, welcome to Question Coach, the podcast by BeBest Coaching. And I am Audrey Jeanrond. I'm a coach. I'm a former Big Four consultant and founder of BeBest Coaching. This show is for business professionals and L&D leaders who want real tools, real science, real conversations, and not the motivational fluff. So, let's get into this. Let's see first the science of forgetting. Let me introduce you to someone who understood this problem long before we did. Hermann Ebbinghaus. In 1885, yes, 1885, this German psychologist experimented that on himself. He memorized lists of meaningless syllables. Then he tracked how fast he forgot them. What he discovered became known as the Ebbinghaus Forgetting Curve, one of the most replicated findings in cognitive science. The result is as follows. Within 24 hours, he forgets approximately 50 to 80% of new information we just learned. 50 to 80% within 24 hours. Within a week, up to 90%. 90% is gone. Unless, and this is the key word, unless this is actively reinforced. Now, here's the painful part for anyone working in L&D. We have known this. And the corporate training is still the one-off event model. The one-day offsite, half-a-day workshop, 3-hour e-learning module, done. Let me give you some numbers that might sting a little. According to the Association for Talent Development, the famous ATD, only 12% of employees apply new skills learned in training back to their jobs. 12%. The Braden Hall Group found that 70% of training content is forgotten within 24 hours, if not reinforced. And a global survey by McKinsey found that fewer than a quarter of organizations say the L&D programs actually improve performance. Fewer than 25%. These are not small numbers. These are industry-wide structural problems. And here where I want to push back on the narrative. The problem is not the training design in isolation. In most cases I've seen, and I've seen quite a few, the content is good. The facilitators are talented. The intention is right. The problem is the ecosystem around the training. That's what happened before the training, what happened during the training, and crucially, what happens after the training. So here are the 3 real culprits of the non-transfer. Let me name these 3 culprits I see again and again, both from my years in consulting at Big Four firms, where I watched expensive programs delivered, zero behavioral change, and from my work today as a coach supporting managers and L&D across industries. So the first culprit number 1, no pre-work, no priming. Learners show up cold. Nobody prepared them. Nobody told them why this training matters for their specific context. Nobody asks them to identify one challenge they want to solve during the day. So they arrive passively, they sit through the program passively, and they leave passively. Learning research is very clear on this. Cognitive readiness is a precondition for transfer. When people enter a learning experience with a personal question they're trying to answer, their brain becomes active. It starts filtering information through the lens of, oh, this is relevant to me. Without that, it's just white noise. Culprit number 2, manager absence. This one is backed by some of the strongest data in the learning transfer literature. Let me say that again. In the learning transfer literature. A landmark study by Deloitte identified manager support as the single highest impact factor in whether training will stick. Yet in how many organizations is the manager actually briefed before the training? Does the manager know what their team member just learned? Does the manager create space the following week, the following weeks to practice the new skill? Most of the time, the answer is no. And then we wonder why nothing changes. Culprit number 3, the post-training void. After the training ends, there is nothing. No follow-up, no practice opportunity, no coaching, no accountability structure. So people go back to their full inboxes, their next meeting, their next deliverable. The training becomes a memory, a nice day out of the office. And that's it. This is where the famous Olivero study comes in. It was published in 1997, and it's repeatedly cited by the ICF, the International Coaching Federation. This study found that training alone increases productivity by 22%. Not bad, but training combined by coaching increases productivity by 88%, nearly 4 times more. That's not marginal difference. That's a structural difference in design. The problem is not the content of the course. The problem is what you're relying on a one-time spike when the brain needs a gradual, sustained climb. So now let me tell you about what you can do. Let me give you my 3-step framework. I call it the prime, anchor, sustain. And yes, this does not require a bigger budget. It requires for you a better design. So step 1 is prime, before the training. Priming is about activating the learner's brain before the training even starts. Send pre-work, not a 50-page read, but just one question. What is one specific challenge you face that this training could help with? That's it. One question, but it will create personal ownership before even the day begins. It makes participants arrive with a problem to solve, not just a calendar invite to fulfill. Second, brief the managers. Send them a 2-paragraph summary. Here's what your team will learn. Here's what to look for afterwards. Here's one question to ask your team member the week after. That 2-paragraph email is one of the highest ROI things you can do in your entire L&D program. And finally, set behavioral goals with your participants. Not vague aspiration, not I want to be a better communicator, but after this training, I will open every team meeting with a 2-minute round of updates before diving into the agenda. Specific, observable, measurable. Rings a bell? Step 2. During the training, after the prime, you anchor during the training. The key principle here is design for transfer, not just for engagement. High engagement scores on the day are nice, but they are not the goal. The goal is behavioral change 3 weeks later. If you can spread your training across multiple sessions, even 2 shorter sessions with a gap between them, do it. Spaced repetition is one of the most evidence-based techniques in cognitive science for improving long-term retention. And every session with a structured action plan. Not just what did you learn, but what specific thing will you do differently, by what date, and who will you tell about it? Social accountability is a powerful lever. Research on implementation intention by a psychologist called Peter Goldwinter shows that people who commit to a specific when, where, and how are 2 to 3 times more likely to follow through. That's not soft coaching talk, that's published behavioral science. Step 3, sustain. This is the part after the training. This is where 90% of program will fall apart. And this is where the biggest gains are available to you, often at a very, very low additional cost, if any. First thing, schedule a 3 weeks check-in. Why after 3 weeks? Because that's typically when initial motivation starts to fade. Researcher Philippa Lally from University College London found it. It takes an average of 66 days to form a new habit, not 21 days as the popular myth goes. 3 weeks is not the finish line. It is actually the first real test. If you check in at 3 weeks, you catch people who are struggling before they give up entirely. Second thing that you can do, include manager touch points at 2 or 6 weeks post-training. Give managers a 1-pager guide with 3 coaching questions. Low investment, genuinely high impact. Managers don't need to become coaches overnight. They just need to ask the right questions to make space for the conversation. Third thing you can do is offer a peer coaching or micro coaching sessions. This doesn't mean every participant needs a full coaching program. Even a 30-minute structured peer reflection call with the right questions as a guide can significantly increase application rate. At BeBest, we designed this as optional, but we really strongly encourage them. And we constantly see it makes a measurable difference on how many participants actually apply what they learned during the training. The philosophy behind all of this is simple. Momentum fades and the structure preserves it. So let me bring it all together. Here are the 4 things that I want you to walk away from this episode. First, forgetting is not a personal failure. It is a neurological reality. Hermann Ebbinghaus documented it in 1885. Plan for it instead of being surprised by it. Second, the 3 culprits of non-transfer are no priming, no manager alignment, and no post-training support. If your program is missing any one of these 3, you are leaving the majority of this impact on the table. The prime, anchor, sustain. That's your new framework. Before, during, after. All 3 phases matter equally. The training day itself is a middle chapter of a story that starts 2 weeks earlier and ends at least 6 weeks later. You do not necessarily need more budget. This is the thing that I want you to remember. You need a different design. Some of the most impactful changes I've seen in L&D programs came from simply adding a manager briefing email and a 3-week check-in, both of which cost nothing. If you are an L&D professional, an HR business partner, or a manager who runs training for your team, here's your one concrete action for today. Look at the next program you're running, whether that's next week or next month, and ask yourself this: do I have a sustained plan? Not just, do I have a good content? Do I have a plan for what happens 3 weeks after the training will end? If the answer is no, that is your starting point. Everything else flows from there. So, thank you so much for listening to Question Coach. If this episode gave you something useful, a framework, a new perspective, one concrete thing to try, please share it with a colleague who runs training program. Leave a comment or review it on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever is your platform. And connect with me on LinkedIn. I am Audrey Jeanrond. I will always love hearing from people on the field. And until next time, keep asking better questions.